بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين ما بعد. So last week we did the first position on is it permissible for women to visit the graves? And we finished the first position, which was what? As permissible, ibah. And they had how many hadith? They had 5 hadith of the Prophet ﷺ that they used to prove that it's permissible for women to visit the graves. Majority of those hadith were in Sahih Bukhari and Sahih Muslim. So they weren't arguing necessarily about if the hadith is authentic, but they were arguing about what? The understanding of the hadith. What does the hadith mean? Not is the hadith authentic. That wasn't the argument. If the hadith is even authentic for you to say that it's a proof in itself. But they were arguing the argument for those who argued against them, meaning the statement was, yes, it's permissible for the sisters to go to the graveyard, visit the graves. And some of the scholars disagreed. And they brought their dalil for why it was permissible, the hadith that on Sahih Bukhari and Sahih Muslim, and the other hadith. And then the other scholars who argued said, no, those hadith don't mean that. And that's where the argument goes. So they were arguing on the understanding of the hadith and not necessarily if the hadith is authentic. Again, this is not the traditional way of learning masail, of learning issues. This is what, in reality, is fiqh muqaran. It's comparative. And you don't learn masail by going through stuff like this. Generally, that's not the way that fiqh is taught. But this is just for the benefit of, especially our city, especially, that we make issues like this an issue of if a person is practicing Islam correctly or not. Should I even go to a janazah with these people or not? Because the women are at the graveyard during a janazah, right? I'm not going to that masjid from here on out. Why? They had women at the graveyard and nobody said anything. Issues like this that become issues of division, when in reality, the issues that they're old issues to the scholars of Islam, and they're issues that may be stronger than what you originally knew, what a person originally knows. And most times, majority of the time, people don't know what they're talking about, but they know one side of the coin, as they say, or they know one position. And if they follow that, that's fine. But to go beyond that, to try to make everyone see what you see, is something that Islam doesn't allow. So the second position, al-qawl al-thani. And again, in this section, we're going to see there's some ikhtisar, there's some summary. Because again, it can go longer. It can be longer. Even last week, the whole first class was on one position. And I don't think this one, because the last position is kind of short. So we might be able to, inshallah, we can finish tonight. We'll see here that the second position is that it is haram, tahrim ziyarat al-nisa al-qubur, that it is impermissible for women to visit the grave. And this is a famous position that is translated in many of the books that we read in English. Many of the books that we read in English have this position in it, meaning that if a woman goes to the grave and it's haram, that means what on her? It's a sin. It's a sin. Clear? That means for the one, they believe the woman who goes to the grave, to visit the graves, is sinful. And the person that is sinful is deserving of the punishment of Allah Jalla wa Ala. This is, as he says, هذا قول في مذهب الحنفية. This is a position with some of the Hanafi scholars. Some of them. He says في مذهب المالكية. And some of the Maliki scholars, والرواية عند الحنابلة, also some of the Hanbali scholars, the Madhab Ahmed, they also hold this position that it is haram. There's also the position of Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah ta'ala. Now, of course, they have dalil. right? Of course, we need to know that the ulama, the scholars of Islam, don't, as we say, shoot from the hip, right? Scholars of Islam do not just come up with stuff from thin air, but it's based on text. So the first dalil, which actually includes 3 ahadith, 3 ahadith that kind of carry the same meaning. Hadith Abi Hurairah radiallahu anhu, أن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم لعن زوارات القبور, that the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم cursed the female visitors of the grave, the females that go to the graveyard. طيب, this is the first hadith. The second hadith is the hadith of Ibn Abbas رضي الله عنهما. قال لعن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم زائرات القبور والمتخذين عليها المساجد والسرج. That the Prophet ﷺ also cursed, la'ana, he cursed the female visitors of the grave and those who take the graves as masajid and decorate the graves. Hadith Hassan ibn Thabit. And the third hadith, قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم لعن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم, he said to the Messenger صلى الله عليه وسلم, he cursed زوارات القبور, the female visitors of the grave. Clear? All of the wording here is directed to the female. How does this prove? How do these 3 ahadith prove that it is not allowed for our sisters to visit the grave? What is the wajh al-istidlal? What is the proof inside of these ahadith that the women are not allowed to visit the grave? That he cursed them. So if he cursed them, then cursing is a form of,
it's a threat.
It's a threat. طيب. I was just making sure that's it. So, Again? A punishment comes with the curse. طيب. Therefore, you gotta complete it. See, right? Yeah. When you leave it like that, y'all, you gotta complete it. It's a curse. طيب. There's a punishment with it. So that equals what? That shows that something is impermissible. That points to show that something is haram, right? And this is the wedge that they use. They say the fact that the wording in the hadith, all 3 of those hadith, are al-la'n. They say that the curse yadullu ala tahrim. Anytime a curse, it says it points that that thing is haram to do. How many hadith? 3. This is their first dalil. The first dalil of who? Those who say that it is haram for the sisters to visit the graveyard. The 3 ahadith, and all 3 of them has la'na Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The curse of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam cursed the female visitor of the grave. And they say what? If it's a curse, that points that something is impermissible. And they say also that the curse, if the curse is on something, then this is from the most clear pointers or directors that something is not allowed, that something is haram. One of the clear things that shows that something is haram is that the curse of the laws on the curse of the Prophet is on it. Clear? Of course, y'all, of course, the other scholars disagree with them, or we wouldn't be having this discussion, right? So the other scholars who disagree, the first thing they disagree, and they say, number one, da'fu hadhihi al-hadith. They say these, how many hadith? These 3 hadith are weak. These 3 hadith are weak, right? And they say that in the isnad, in the chain, we know what the isnad is, right? Everybody know what the isnad is? What is the isnad? What's the isnad? A chain of narration. What does that mean? A chain of narration. Because I don't know anything about that. So if you say a chain of narration, the sisters know? Is the sisters over there? If the sisters know, they can speak up. They know. What is a chain of narration? It says in the book, chain of narration.
Chain of narration is the chronological order of every person who read that had a slide from the law.
Again? Chronological.
Or a person who laid the hadith, starting the process of up until now. Or up until
ما فهمت شيئا. I don't know. I don't understand what you mean. I don't know. All I want to know is
Who heard first?
who heard what first. Pay attention, y'all. You gotta act like the person that you're talking to doesn't know. I don't know what you're talking about. This is new. Everybody doesn't understand. Every dean doesn't have a isnad. You dig what I'm saying? Everybody doesn't know what a chain of narration is. So now you got to make it clear, make the picture clear, because the argument is that they have 3 hadith that carry the word, the curse of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam on the person. And they say, what? Those hadith are weak. You can't use them as a proof. So really, in reality, to us, you have 0 text, because all 3 of those are weak. How are they weak? Because in the chain is people who are spoken about, meaning in the chain, there are people who we can't accept what they're saying. We can't believe. That's what I'm saying. There are people in the chain who we can't believe what they're saying. We have reason not to believe that this person is being truthful, right? And there's many reasons that they don't mention here. That's the science of Jarh wa Ta'dil. There are many reasons, the real science. There are many reasons that a person's statement cannot be accepted. Meaning, for example, if we went up and right now, you say, he heard it from him, or I'm sorry, he heard it from him, 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 all the way back, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. There's 7 people in that chain. We would consider you 7 brothers a chain, right? And this is how the ahadith are relayed. We consider you 7 brothers a chain. So if out of the 7 brothers, there's 1 brother that we got an issue with. He has a known problem. His problem could be a lot of things. It's not one thing. He doesn't necessarily have to be a liar, but he could be a liar. He could be a liar, or he could be that people consider him a liar, or it could be that his memory after a certain age was weak. He was good up until he was 60, but after 60, you got to check the chain and see how old he is. So it's a lot of issues that can make us doubt if this person can be relied on and accept what he's saying. Like if they're saying that in the chain of these 3 hadith that they have, there are people in that chain that have some problems like that. Therefore, we cannot accept those 3 hadith that carry the statement, the curse of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam on the female visitors of the grave. So to us, you have no hadith. You have no proof to say that they can't go. Clear? Huh? Tayyib. Of course, they don't accept that. Right? And this is the academic study and the academic debate between the scholars. And this is how issues become issues of khilaf. This is behind the scenes that everyone is not on the level to even be able to comprehend it, right? Issues like this and just this type of detail is somewhat advanced, right? This is not like this is a little higher advanced type of reading. So of course they argue back, and they argue with 3 arguments against their 1 argument. So what is the argument to say that they can't go, that they can go? They brought the dalil and say the women can't go. Why? Why can't they go? 3 hadith that carry what? The curse, not Rasulullah, on the who? The female visitor of the grave, right? Okay, the other scholars, they debate them and say what? Those 3 hadith are not authentic. They have problems. We can't accept those. Clear? They weak. Right? We can't accept them. They're weak. The isnad, the chain, the problem with the chain, the narration. Okay? So now the other ones who say, yes, we can use them, they argue back. It's a back and forth. And this is the academic debate. This is not because I am who I am and I say this, you have to take it. As many of us think. Some of us think because Sheikh Fulan said it, khalas, there's nothing else to talk about. The Sheikh has spoken. All right? Yeah, the Sheikh has spoken. Sheikh said it, right? What are we even talking about? And if you argue with me, you must not want the truth. Right? Allah musta'an. Knowledge-wise, the ulama do not debate like that. You say what you have and you bring your proof, and I have a rebuttal for you. And if my rebuttal is weak, you need to prove that to me this week. These we talking about Imam Malik, Imam Shafi'i, Imam Ahmed, Imam Abu Hanifa, that they didn't accept what each other said. We talking about a sheikh from today, ala ayn wa ra'as, no disrespect to any of the ulama, but we're not talking about people like Imam Malik and Imam Ahmed, Imam Abu Hanifa. We're talking about, right? We're not talking about them. And people think they can come and just say, just because the sheikh said it, there's nothing else to talk about. The academic debate goes back and forth with proof, not just what I'm mad at you. So they say the 3 hadith are weak because of the chain. Then they come back and say, wait a minute. They say everyone in the chain is the 7 brothers we're talking about. All of those 7 brothers, they say, قَدْ عَدَّلَهُ وَوَثَّقَهُ طَائِفًا مِنْ أَهْلِ الْعِلْمِ. Right? So this is what happens. The 7 brothers who carry the hadith, and these would be people starting from the time of the Sahaba, right? Those people who carry the hadith in the chain, let's just say one scholar, or not one scholar, let's say how it happens. A group of scholars say the second person in the chain has a weak memory. We can't accept what he says. We can't take that whole hadith because what? It's possible he left something out, right? Everybody knows his memory was weak. It's possible he left something out. So in that case, group A, they point out a defect in this person. Therefore, they might say, no, we don't take the hadith, right? On the other hand, it might be another group of scholars who don't agree with that itself. No, his memory is not weak. Maybe they differ. So some would consider him okay to take a hadith from, and some don't. So who do they differ on? In this case, they differed on the person. Is the person okay to accept what he says or not? Clear? It goes that deep, y'all. Not just is the hadith authentic or not. Past that. The hadith is authentic? Yes or no? We already did that. We get past that. Is the hadith authentic? Does the hadith mean what you're saying it means? Now we could disagree on that, possibly. Right? Like last class. Now we get into, well, the hadith is weak. Why is it weak? It's a claim. We claim the hadith is not authentic. Why? Because of such and such. You're saying he's not okay. But there's a whole bunch of other group of scholars that say he is okay. Clear?
So it's kind of like having around people just one style.
Yes, it's like that, but the ulama don't go as far as to call people, innovators and deviants every time somebody disagrees with them. Right? It's called khilaf mu'tabar. It's a recognized difference of opinion amongst the scholars. It's recognized. All the scholars already know all of that. You don't have to call people names, and it is what it is. If not that they consider them to be correct, they're wrong. Respectfully, we respectfully disagree. Right? So in this case, they argue back that, okay, you're saying that he's not okay, but other scholars say he is okay. Clear? And then it goes a little further than that regarding the chain. I hope that's clear, y'all. Any questions so far? Any questions? I hope we can see where the differences come in with the scholars.
So, probably the person is number.
For example, yes. No, he didn't mention it. You see what I'm saying? That's why I'm saying to summarize. If you want to get all the way to the bottom, if you want to peel all the layers back, you got to find out, because he just mentioned in general, there's some people in the chain. But no. We want to get like a real tahqiq. We want to get all the way to the bottom. Who the people in the chain you're saying are not good? What are their names? Because now we got to go look up each person that you're saying is not good. They didn't mention, they just said the general. He just mentioned general. There are people in the chain. Right? That's why I told you to summarize. In the full research, we got to find out, okay, well, who are the people you're talking about? What are their names? And then we got to go to each person, look up their name. Well, what are you saying? His memory, where in his biography is it pointed out that he has a weak memory, or he's a liar, or he's accused of being a liar, or accused of having a weak memory?
How would they find out?
The books of Rijal, they're books specifically for that purpose. They're books of scholars have gathered specifically discussing the biography of men. Who is Fulan with his name? That's why the names are so important. How many Abdullahs was it from the Salaf? All right. If the chain says An Abdullah, how you know which Abdullah that is? You have to know what time period. Who does that Abdullah narrate on in the chain. It's a whole science. It's a whole science by itself. That Sheikh Muhammad Ali Adam, rahimahullah, was a scholar in that field. May Allah have mercy on him. And I mean, Tayyib. So again, he kept it general there. And that's why I said at the beginning, we can go deeper, but just to show you how this happens. Okay? So that's their first rebuttal to the fact that you say our hadith are weak. Well, you're saying they're weak, but basically you say they're weak, but a bunch of other scholars said that they're not weak. Those people are okay. Right? Nobody, and they also say nobody totally agreed that they're weak. So some say he's okay to relate, and some say he's not. Cool. Tayyib. Also, they say also that these hadith, with these people that you say have some problems with them that we can't take from, they say even with those problems, this is their argument, even with those problems, the hadith that they narrate are still on the level of being Hasan hadith. We know what a Hasan hadith is? Huh? Good. That's a translation. I mean, you got authentic. Huh? A Hasan hadith is not on the level of what we hear Sahih. A Sahih hadith is the authentic, what is translated as authentic. A Hasan hadith can be used as a proof, but is not as strong as the authentic hadith. No. If we say linguistically, like it's translated, Sahih, Hasan good, authentic, or sound. They translate authentic as, Sahih is sound or authentic, and Hasan is good. That's not the issue or not. That's what they're saying. They're saying that even though with those problems that you're claiming, right? Even with those problems, okay, the hadith is not authentic, but it's still Hasan. And a hadith that's authentic or Hasan, we can use as a proof. It's not because it's Hasan we can't use it. The hadith we don't use is what? Da'if, weak. So even with the problems, they still remain Hasan.
There's levels to that too. Before we can Hasan and Sahih.
Sahih.
I won't go on that, but yeah, different levels to that.
Yeah, we have it. It's good. It says even with that, it's Hasan. Now, if you want to get into the darajat of that Hasan li ghayrihi, that's a whole nother science. And that he didn't bring here. Tayyib. He said also their last rebuttal to the fact that you say these hadith are weak. They really defending these are hadith, y'all, because these are 3 hadith that say what? That is haram, the curse of the Prophet or something. So they defended these 3 hadith all the way. It says also in these hadith, even though they're different narrations, they say walaysa fil asani, isnadain man yuhtam bil kadhib. Nobody has been accused of being a liar. Nobody's been accused of being a liar, right? But they say the weakness, if you find the weakness, they say it's min jihat al-lafz. It's from the wording, that the wording is not authentic, right? It says وَهَذَا حُجَّ بِلَا رَيْبٍ. And just because the wording is not authentic, and this works in the science of a hadith, you might have a bunch of a hadith. They might not be the strongest, but it's a lot of them. And when a lot of them, not a lot of weak ones, right? A lot of hadith are considered, as we say, good. And you maybe have a bunch of them, makes it a little stronger. Okay, and that's the science of hadith. And that's their argument for that. Tayyib. The next thing they say is, and they argue this pretty strong because why? Number one, the curse is not something light, y'all. This is a dua from the Prophet ﷺ. The curse of the Prophet ﷺ is to push somebody away from Allah's mercy. So in this case, the curse of the Prophet ﷺ on who? The sisters that visit the grave. That's a heavy, right? This is heavy. For y'all to say that, this is why the debate is a back and forth. They say, okay, these ahadith that you say, fiha ra'na zawarat al-qubur, they say, qad nusikhat bil-idhin fi ziyara, number one. Wa huwa idhin am lil-rijal wal-nisa. They say, okay, the ahadith that you're saying where the curse was on the women for going to the graveyard, they say that these hadith, all three of them, were abrogated. They were erased. The ruling was erased. The ruling used to stand. It used to be that they couldn't go. But then the ruling was erased when the Prophet ﷺ gave everybody permission. And the women were included in that permission to go. That same hadith from last week. Right? So this is their next argument. Okay, those hadith that you're saying, they're weak. No, they argue them down, they're not weak. Okay, even if you say they're not weak, okay, well, they were abrogated anyway. Because after the Prophet ﷺ said that, right, he came later and said for everybody to go to the graveyard. So now what's your argument? They say, we do not agree. We don't agree that they were abrogated, that the ruling was erased. We disagree. We don't agree with you to say that the permission came after the curse of the Prophet ﷺ. We don't agree with that order, time-wise, okay? I hope this is clear, y'all. What happens is this. They're saying that, let's just say, I'm just using years just for the sake of example. Let's just say in the year 1000, well, let's go further back and make it a little, no, I'm using for us. In the year 1000, right? The Prophet ﷺ said, for example, the first hadith, as they're saying, that the women could not go to the graveyards, right? The curse of Allah on the women who go to the graveyards. They're arguing, okay, yes, he said that in the year 1000, but in the year 1002, he came and said that they can go. Everybody can go to the graveyard. So the first one doesn't count anymore from 1000. That's abrogation, time-wise. It came after it, and it erases the rule from before. Clear? They're saying this is what happened, right? So even if you use those weak hadith, all right, those weak hadith are erased time-wise because they were abrogated. They were erased. Clear? They come back and say, la, they were not erased. We disagree with that time-wise. We don't agree with that. So, number one. They say, number one, we don't agree that they were erased, they were abrogated. And number two, we don't agree that the women entered into that general allowance to go to the graveyard. We don't agree with that either. Now what has to happen in reality? They have to do research. How can we prove now which one came first? You with me? He didn't get into that. That's what I'm saying. It's summarized. He didn't get in. Now you can't just come and say this came in 1000, this came in 1002. Well, how you find that out? Where'd you get that from? Like, where can I find that at? Where do you get the authority to say that? Right? So in reality, it has to be a further research on the issue, but that's the way that they argue that point. So yeah, they also argue, and they say that also, those ahadith that you guys are using, those three ahadith with the curse of the Prophet ﷺ, they say that this curse is towards the mukaththarat, the woman who constantly goes to the graveyard. Not just a woman who goes to the graveyard. I ain't finished. Hold on. Huh? It says mukaththarat, the women, right? The women. Zawarat is the women, sir. Zawara? Hey. Method, yeah. طيب. Yeah, but Zawarat includes the men? No, sure. أدري. طيب. Yes. So it's for going for anybody over and over. Jade. That's what they're saying. That's what they're saying. That's their argument. That's what they're saying, yes. Mumtaz, Jade. We're gonna get to that. طيب. They say that the hadith says for the women who constantly go to the graveyard. They go a lot, like they go constantly. طيب. He says, how do we know that that's what the hadith proves? Because the wording in the hadith is zawarat. And that word in Arabic is on what's called siga mubalagha, which siga mubalagha means that you're not just, for example, a liar, like you're a compulsive liar. If you want to call somebody a compulsive liar, there's a special scale, special way to say it in Arabic. Not just a regular liar, it's a compulsive liar, like full liar. Then he'd be like, no, I got family. They said they like he's compulsive. You know what I'm saying? It's another level of lying. So the wording in the hadith is on the siga mubalagha, which shows excessiveness in something. They don't have to be in line in something. طيب, the word is zawarat dal ala takthir. And that in the hadith, it points to something that they do it a lot. It says, so, and this doesn't, you with me? The fact that someone does it a lot, a woman goes to the graveyard a lot, the curse is on, so they're saying in reality, the curse is on the woman who goes to the graveyard a lot. And if the woman doesn't go to the graveyard a lot, then what? Then the curse is not on her if she goes. That's their argument. It was listen, what's strong and what's not strong, I'm just saying what the argument is. Huh? زيارة أيه ما أدري ابحث يا أخي ابحث.
Basically, I mean, this is the thing you got to be careful. So, not the language, have a proper understanding of the language from air.
Yes.
Because somebody can translate that wrong. They could leave off the assessment part.
Yes.
And they take it as, it's women.
Yes.
Or, what I mean? That could mess up in the translation.
Yes.
If you read it wrong.
Yes. That's why it's important to learn Arabic. If you keep depending on translators, no disrespect to brothers who translate. To nobody who translates, not a disrespect to nobody. But if you keep putting yourself and you keep putting the third person between you, you're depending on the accuracy of the person translating. And everybody is on different levels. Some translators have a very high accuracy, 99%, and some translators might be on the 60% range. Allah alam. But that's all. You know what I'm saying? You put yourself in that position where you have to depend on that. The translator has to understand the language itself, and the translator also has to understand the issue. Sometimes it could be an issue where the language itself carries different meanings in this issue. You with me? Like, for example, the word wajh. In Arabic, wajh is face. But wajh al-istidlal, it carries not necessarily a point of view, but how do you prove it? Your angle of proof. Your angle of proof in this case. So wajh, and sometimes they say wafi wajhin, from another opinion, right? With the Hanabila. Fi wajhin. It depends on what you translate and it may depend on what the word means. Even though the word has original meaning in Arabic. Clear? So they say that is sigma mubalagha. That's their argument. So therefore, the women who don't go all the time don't fall into the people who are cursed. Of course, they don't agree with that. Of course. Right? This is a debate. Right? You have to totally convince me that what you're saying is correct. So they disagree. And they say, wait a minute. One hadith says, za'irat. Za'irat. And this word can be used, za'irat, the visitor. This word can be used even if a woman visits the grave one time. So it doesn't prove that she always has to go, because the other hadith, all the hadith, the three hadith, they don't use the same word. One says zawarat, which is excessive visiting, and one says za'irat, which could be if you go one time, right? And they say, وَهَذَا اللَّفْظ زِيَادَةٌ عِلْمٍ يَجِبُ الْأَخْذُ بِهِ. This is a qaida between a hadith. When sometimes you have a hadith that is, sometimes the two hadiths could say the same thing, right? Up until one point. And then one hadith has a little extra on it, explaining the issue, which could be, as they say, this is extra knowledge that you have to take. It's obligatory to take that extra knowledge that's involved in that other authentic hadith, which is another issue of research that, of course, he didn't get into, but he just mentions it. He mentions it. طيب. And this is, somebody else already said this. I think he said this. He said that, you okay? He said that, he said also, if the intent behind it was the women who excessively go to the graveyard, if that was the intent, he said that it would have to be clarified in the Sharia what does excessive? When does somebody reach the point of excessiveness? How many times is excessive? You with me?
No.
If you're going to turn around and say, man, she goes to the graveyard excessively. Well, what's excessive? Who decides what excessive is? The Prophet ﷺ didn't mention that. The Quran doesn't mention that. So who is that left up to decide that this sister goes to the graveyard excessively? Right?
Maybe the society at the time. Let's look at order.
The order?
Normal.
What's normal?
Society.
Mumkin. He didn't mention it. But you see the argument? Yeah. طيب نبين الشارع حد القليل والكثير من الزيارة ببيان لحدود الله. That if that was the case, then the Prophet ﷺ would have defined when it becomes excessive and when it's not excessive. If that was the case. طيب, he says, and there is nothing that shows us, there's no dhabit to show us that this is excessive and this is not excessive. طيب, that was their first dalil, y'all. What was their first dalil? 3 ahadith that carry what? The curse of the Prophet ﷺ on who? The women who visit the graveyards. So yeah, what did they first argue about those 3 hadith in the first place? The first argument is that all 3 of them have problems. They have people in it. They're weak hadith, so you can't use them. So in reality, to us, you have no proof to say that the women can't visit the graveyard. Right? And then they argue back. And they carried on the argument. Tell you, their next dalil to say that the women are not allowed to visit the grave. It says hadith al-dalil al-thani hadith Amr ibn al-As radiyallahu anhu قال بينما نحن نسير مع رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم إذ بصر بامرأة لا نظن أنه يعرفها فلما توسط الطريق وقف حتى انتهت إليه فإذا فاطمة بنت رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم فقال لها ما أخرجك من بيتك يا فاطمة. This is a story where the Prophet ﷺ, he saw a woman walking and she was far away. He didn't know who she was. When she got close, it said that she was, when it got close, it said she was his daughter, Fatima bint Rasulullah alayhi salatu wasalam. طيب, he said to her, what brings you out of your house? Like, what are you doing out here? Who's he talking to? His daughter. This is the dalil that they use to say that the women are not allowed to go to the graveyard. What brought you out of your house, ya Fatima? She said, قالت أتيت أهل هذا البيت. She went to somebody's house to give them condolences because somebody died. Somebody died and she went to the house to give them the azza, right? To give them condolences to the family. طيب. فقال, the Prophet ﷺ said to Fatima, لعلك بلغت معهم الكدى. He asked her, did you go to the grave with the family? This is what he asked her. Right? قالت معاذ الله إن أكون بلغتها وقد سمعتك تذكر ما في ذلك ما تذكر. She said, basically, I seek Allah's refuge from doing that when I heard you say what you told us about going to the graves. I seek Allah's refuge from doing something like that when I heard you say whatever you said about us going to the graveyard. Hadith's not finished. He said, and his wording at the end of this hadith is still a problem for me. He said, sallallahu alayhi wasallam, لو بلغتها معهم ما رأيت الجنة حتى يراها جد أبيك. If you would have gone to the graveyard with them, you would not see paradise until it says Jad Abik. What does that mean? Until your great grandfather entered paradise first? Maybe. The threat is connected to Fadl.
That happened before the abolition.
Oh, we ain't get there yet, Sheikh. Hold. You ain't just to the wedge still out. Hold up, that's the hadith, right? So now they have to prove. Now they're going to prove what in that hadith shows that women are not allowed to visit the grave. The first thing they say, Al-Wa'id al-Shadid ala Za'iratul Qubur. The severe threat about what? Seeing paradise or not seeing paradise and whatever's connected to it. right? The severe threat, number one. They say also, they say that from her statement, this is what they say. What did she say? She said, A'udhu billah, from doing something that I heard you, after I heard you tell us about doing it, which is what? Going to the grave. She said, I wouldn't do nothing like that after I heard you say that. They say that proves that with the Sahaba, the understanding was that the women were not allowed to go to the grave. You with me? They say in her statement is a proof that what was the norm with them, the Sahaba, the female Sahabiyat, is that it was not allowed for the women to go to the grave. This is Fatima, the daughter of the Prophet. All right. So they're saying her understanding is a proof that that was the understanding of the female companions of the Prophet. Clear? طيب. Now the other scholars, what they say? We don't agree. Number one, they say it might be what's the name? The card. If it's the card, it's cool. They say number one, this hadith with Fatima, or better. La. Yeah, that's the card. If it's the card, it's cool. They say number one, that hadith of Fatima is what? Weak. The hadith is weak. طيب. They say أن هذا الحديث ضعيف لا تقوم به حجة. The hadith is weak with Fatima رضي الله عنها, so y'all don't have no proof to say that anyway. So far, y'all, this is 4 hadith they have. And so far, the other scholars have argued that all 4 of their hadith are weak. Now they defend them. They do defend them, right? They defend their hadith, but they're arguing that is weak. They come back and say, and this shows the end of the hadith, they come back. You said they're weak. We're saying that these hadith قد صححه جماعة من المحدثين المتقدمين والمتأخرين. They say that many of the scholars of the past have said the hadith is authentic. Some of the scholars of the past said it's authentic. Some of the present day scholars during that time said that they are, or the later day scholars said that they are authentic. So now the scholars differ on what? Here. Huh? What are they different on? The authenticity of the hadith. Is the hadith, can we use it as a proof or not? Which hadith? With Fatima. That she did what? She went to visit a person when they were having, it was a death. She went to visit them to give them the family condolences. Prophet ﷺ saw her coming from there. He said, did you go to the graveyard with them? She said, I wouldn't go to the graveyard after I heard you say what you said to us about going to the graveyard. They say this hadith is weak. Hadith is weak, so there's no proof. I got 4 hadith to us. You have 4 hadith, they're all weak. Saajid. Allahu A'lam. Allahu A'lam. I don't understand the wording, the threat. Jad Abi. I don't know what it means. Allahu A'lam. This hadith, let me see. This hadith is what it says, Rawahu Ahmed, and the Muslim Imam Ahmed wa Abu Dawud, Kitab al-Janaiz. Bab al-Ta'ziyah. Inshallah, we can look it up to get the meaning. I don't know what the Allah. It says, لو بلغتها معهم ما رأيت الجنة حتى يراها جد أبيك. 461. أيوة. أيوة. That's it.
Careful.
طيب. We're gonna look it up. طيب.
He's talking to Uncle, he's referring to himself. He is, who's your father? Him. He's talking, who's referring to his grandfather. So this is what he said. I'm not
We just told you. All of this, y'all, this is not, this min bab ta'aleem, as Sheikh Abdul Majid used to tell us. All of this is from the angle that we just learning the issue. Not this one is stronger. The people who do that's wrong. This is just the issue. This is why people do what they do. This is the difference of opinion. This is what they understand. Whether you think this one is strong or you think the one last week was strong or the next position is strong, that's a different story, right? I'm not saying that this is the strong, you got to do this. All I'm saying is this is what they say. This is the proof they use, and this is how they argue it back and forth. What I think is strongest don't make a difference. طيب. طيب. What do you think so far, y'all? They have how many ahadith? 4. The other scholars argue that for the scholars that say the women cannot visit the graveyard, they have 4 ahadith that they use. The other ulama argue, number 1, before we even start talking, number 1, all 4 of your hadiths are weak. Weak. Yes. Weak. And if you're weak, you don't have. It can. When you say authentic, it depends what you mean by authentic. Yeah. If you say not authentic.
They say da'if. They say da'if.
Yes. So what do you mean by authentic, though?
So that could be
Hassan. It could be authentic. It could be Hassan. It can be Sahih. It could be or Hassan. Or it could be Hassan li ghayrihi. Right? All of them we use, no problem. But da'if is no proof of it. You can't use a weak hadith.
only time hadith
فضائل الأعمال. فضائل الأعمال. No, that's what is written on the book. فضائل الأعمال. Like righteous actions, the encouragement to do good deeds and stuff like that. That's an issue. I don't want to just leave it like that. فضائل الأعمال with the shurut.
That's a movement.
Yes, a movement in general. Weak hadith are used in general in certain areas, not all areas. And even when it's used, it's with conditions. No, I can't. It has to do with like the encouragement to do good deeds with conditions.
So like that's my leader, but isn't it a process where there's so many weak hadith that can be raised to awesome? There's so many going back. It's like it's impossible that it's alive. So they raise it to Hassan. They do that same thing with Hassan to Saajid. He's great. There's so many hadith, so many chains going back. Like
so many weak hadith that they raise the weak.
So many chains. There's so many chains of weak hadith, and it's impossible. I mean, weakness isn't like severe.
They might say that the hadith are weak, but the meaning is sahih. The hadith is weak, but the weakness, the meaning is sahih. The chains are weak. If you got a bunch of weak hadith, how you make that strong?
It's possible that the mental is
the wording, the actual wording. Yeah. Allah Akbar.
Hadiths that have different narrations they seem weak, but the weakness is up here. It could be like due to the memory, not a lie or anything.
We hope that. We hope that. Maybe. Inshallah. What was you gonna say? You forgot? No, Mustal Hadith, decent. Mustal Hadith, maybe Tadween Sunnah is good. You got it. So, you ready? Al-Karaha. The third position is that it is disliked for the women to visit the graves. Disliked. What does dislike mean Islamically? Permissible?
No, frowned upon.
It's frowned upon. What does that mean? What does frowned upon mean? If we say that's dislike for the sisters to go to the graveyard, what does that carry? It's not haram. Okay, it's not haram.
But it's dislike to who?
It was not to Allah. Just like by Allah. It's not haram, which means if it's not haram, then it doesn't carry what with it? It doesn't carry a sin with it. Also, what? It's best not to do it. Things that are disliked, it's best not to do. It's best to stay away from them.
Something that's needed, that's disliked, but I want disliked. What you can do, but it's not said.
There's something that's makruh. So let's look at the meaning of cracking your fingers in the salat, for example.
That's like by the law.
It's like it's an action that is makruh.
Looking around and not looking at the
What is makruh, number one? You understand what makruh is. What does this like mean? What does it mean? It hasn't reached the level of being haram. And how does something become makruh is a whole issue in itself. That's a whole issue. We already did what haram means. A person is what? Deserving of Allah's punishment. Right? That's important because makruh doesn't fall under that. So if a person does something that's disliked, they're not deserving of the punishment of Allah Jalla wa'ala. But at the same time, it's something they should stay away from.
So this question is, how can you add something about easy and not?
It all depends. It depends. That goes back to how things are worded many times in the text. Wording is big. That's why a lot of times people ask questions, for example, right? And realistically, a person might say, I got to see the word. Because you're reading it to me, for example, you're reading it to me in English. I don't know the translator. I don't know what the original wording of it. He could have translated. A lot of times it has to do with the wording in Arabic. It's called dalalat al-alfaz. Some words in Arabic point to something and some words in Arabic point to something else. And then you got other texts that also carry the same meaning that and agrees with that meaning. So it's a process, which is something from usul al-fiqh that we probably need to do, like something light on usul al-fiqh and fiqh. Also, the beginning of fiqh, like the terms and stuff like that. So if it's disliked, not that it's permissible, because that would be, let's say, ibaha, maybe, right? Possibly. And this like before, like we said last week, you don't want to get caught up on using English. When you use English terms, when you're using English terms for the Islamic rulings, they can be confusing. You got to understand the Islamic term first, right? And then you got to understand it in your language. What does it mean Islamically? Not the translation. What does the word makruh mean? What's the definition of haram? What's the definition of sunnah? What's the definition of ibaha? What's the definition of wajib? Right? طيب. Al-karaha. If it's disliked, he says, هذا قول المالكية والشافعية والحنابلة. The scholars of the method of Imam Malik, the scholars of the method of Imam Shafi, and the scholars of the method of Imam Ahmed, they all carry a position with that it is disliked. So, which basically, y'all, it could be one madhab that carries multiple positions on one issue. It could be one madhab. The scholars of the method of Imam Malik, some of them might say it's permissible, some of them might say it's haram, and some of them might say it's disliked. Clear? It's not like the whole of the madhab, which is a whole conversation, which is basically, for example, when it comes to issues, there's the standard position of that madhab itself. And then there are other scholars within the madhab who may disagree with that. And that's how it goes for all of that. It's not like they all have to agree on everything like people think. Relied upon? What's the call of the madhab? Yeah. I think the call of the madhab is that it's haram, if I'm not mistaken. I think the mashhur of the madhab is that it's haram. التحريم. هذا قول مثلا it's a riwayah in the Hanabila. Actually, I think the Hanabila is makruh, if I'm not mistaken. It's makruh in the Hanabila. Yeah. With the Hanabila. The scholars of the madhab of Imam Ahmed. Every madhab has a dependent, like, the official statement. The official statement of the madhab is this. For each madhab, they have that. Each madhab, when it comes to an issue, they have an official statement of the madhab. And then under that, they have their scholars that may not agree with that. A lot of times people think the madhab, they blind followers. No, the scholars within that madhab might say, no, they disagree with that. So therefore, inside of that madhab, you have some of them say it's halal, and some of them say it's haram. Inside of the madhab possible. So the ones who say it's dislike, meaning if the women were to go, they wouldn't be sinful, but they should really stay away from it. It's better to stay away from it. And that's a general meaning for something that's disliked. That's very general. Their first dalil, pay attention. The first dalil, the proof to say that what? If a woman goes, she's not sinful, but at the same time, she shouldn't go. They say the hadith of Abu Huraira wa Ibn Abbas wa Hassan radiyallahu anhum ajma'in fi la'na zawarat al-qubur. They say those ahadith that carry the curse of the women. Number one, those three hadith, they say in the hadith of Buraidah, when the Prophet ﷺ gave permission to go. What's the problem? We have some hadith that say it's not allowed for him to go, and then you have the hadith that gives permission to go, right? So they take those hadith and put them together. Clear? They say, how does that prove that it's disliked for women to go? They say it's the hadith of the prohibition. They say those are hadith that carry the curse are specific for women, right? Zawarat, the wording it uses for women, females, the curse. They say in the hadith for the permissibility to go, right? They say that hadith for the permissibility to go is a general allowance, which includes men and women, right? They're putting everything together now. So you got some hadith that say no, some hadith that say yes. They put them all together. So now what happens? They say when you have this case, it's possible, they say it's possible, the ihtimal, that the allowance, it's possible the allowance is only for the men. Possibly. Right? Is it possible? Because you got to understand, y'all, everything is the understanding. We're trying to prove something. So when stuff is trying to be proved, you can't come like this as 100% it. Unless it will be ijma on it. There will be consensus on it. So the fact that it's possible that the allowance is only for the men, right? And they said, or it's possible that the prohibition for the women to visit the graves came later, right? They say in this case, you have two issues. We stuck between al-hadar, something that's not allowed to do, and something that is allowed to do, right? This is what we stuck between. Hadith that say yes, and hadith that say no. This is what we stuck between. They say in this case, when you have something like this, they say, وَمَا كَانَ كَذَلِكَ فَأَقَلَّ الْأَحْوَالِ الْكَرَاهَةِ. When you have something like this, the least you can do is say that it's disliked. That's the least you can do. And what does dislike mean? It's better to stay away from it. Because why? It's possible that that allowance is only for the men. It's really possible. It's yet to be proven. Clear, Willa? Basically, it's like this. It's better for you and safer to stay away from it altogether. Why? Because there's a curse attached to the one who goes. You say, but it's a permission. There's also a hadith that says it's okay for everybody to go. Yeah, but we're not really sure if the women entered into that. So in your case, it will be safest. It will be safest to do what? Not go at all. But if a woman did go, is she sinful? They wouldn't consider her to be sinful. That's bad. That's what? Something that's disliked. You with me? Huh? They're not really, the final judgment is that it's disliked. They say that the qaida, he mentions the principle, but he doesn't really go into it. You seen it? He says, الأمر قد دار بين الحظر والإباحة. Right? He says, وما كان كذلك فأقل أحوال الكراهة. I don't really know how. I said that, didn't I? We stuck between something that is haram and halal. Stuck between the two. Right? And when you have something like that, that is not haram and or not halal and sunnah, like not obligatory and sunnah, you got like the two ends, two opposites, right? Halal and haram, you got two opposites. And he says, when you have something that's two opposites like that, at least the least you could do is say that it's disliked. You with me? It's safe. It's safe. For them, before Allah, it's safe to say it's disliked. You say something is haram, you put the sin on the sin. That means the sin on the person who does it. They deserve to be punished, and they deserve to be punished. It's sinful, and they deserve the punishment of Allah. Hey.
Like that principle.
Here's the issue that something may be doubtful to one person, but not doubtful to somebody else.
Sahih. The hadith may be doubtful. Some stuff is doubtful to some people, and it's clear to other people. So to me, that's a great issue. I don't really have nothing to say about that. To you, it's clear. Now you want to force me. You're going to try to, you're going to make it clear to me. No, it got to be clear to you. I don't understand it like that. It's not clear to me. It's clear to you. Alhamdulillah. If it's clear to you, then you have to act on it. It's your responsibility to behave like it's clear to you. To me, it's not clear. It's gray to me. So it could be that it's gray to me and it's not great to the next person. Saajid? Makruh? Like the Qawl of the Hanabila is that it's makruh. The official statement of the madhab of Imam Ahmad is that it is disliked. Not haram, but disliked. Those things are important, y'all. We need a whole different section of class on that. This is just it's fun, right? Is this fun? Inshallah. So that's what they use to prove. They say, okay, it's disliked because you're in between two opposites. At least you can do is to be on the safe side and say that it is disliked. Of course, the scholars who say that it's haram or the scholars who say that it's allowed, they're going to argue it. It's an argument. It's a debate. They say, number one, Adam al-Taslim, we disagree. We don't agree with you that the women have entered into that general allowance. We don't agree with that. Does everybody see what's going on? Why did they say it's disliked? Why? They consider the general allowance of the women to go. They consider that hadith. They say what? The women are included in that, possibly. They say no. They're arguing. No, they're not included in that. You're saying it's possible they're included in it. We're saying they're not included in it at all. So we don't agree with what you're saying anyway. Clear? That's number one, that the women don't enter. And then he just says, he summarizes, he says, and we already spoke about why they don't enter previously, meaning in the other section, right? But you see how they go? And this is from, as they call it, mantiq, rhetoric, as they translate it as rhetoric. It's a way to argue. And basically, it's like this. In order for me, when it comes to debate, it's basically a setup. We call it a hoop. If I get you to agree with the first part, then you have to agree with my second part. Huh? You with me? If I can get you to agree with the first part, it's going to be no wiggle room for you to disagree with me in the second part that I say to you. So what did they do? They said in their proof, they said, why is it disliked? They said, because the women enter into the general allowance of going to the grave. That's their first thing. So if they get them to agree with that, then they're going to have to agree that, okay, with their final result. So what do? You never agree with the first part that they give you. So what do they say? They say, we don't agree that the women entered into the first part, that general allowance. right? So they stop right there and they say, we already discussed that. Clear? All this is based on the understanding. Again, this is based on the understanding of the hadith and not if the hadith specifically now is authentic or not. Sometimes, y'all, overall, sometimes the difference is in the authenticity. Is the hadith authentic? Can we use it as a Muslims or not? Sometimes that's not a problem. The hadith is in Sahih Bukhari. So what's the next issue? Well, next they might disagree on the meaning of the hadith. Yes, the hadith is authentic, but it doesn't mean what you're saying it means. And they disagree on that, possibly. Sometimes they go a little deeper and they argue on the people inside of those 7 brothers, the chain of narration. They might disagree on that, right? They might disagree on the person. And again, there are separate sciences for all of this, right? And the scholar is able to bring everything together and then write this something short like this for people who don't know how to do all of that to read from. Alhamdulillah. So they say, firstly, we don't agree that the women entered into that general allowance. They say, secondly, it says what? Oh, it's almost over. You see that? That joint's too much, man. That look at the bottom. Where you at? صفحة 463. The last wedge, الوجه الثاني. إن هذا الاستدلال يصبح حجة على من يقول. That's too much. طيب, let's look at their other. Let's look at their next dalil. The next proof that they prove to say that it is allowed for women to, or it is disliked for the sisters to go to visit the graveyard. And of course, y'all, all of this goes back to what? So that when we go to a janazah and we see women at the burial, that we don't have to act crazy. We don't have to say that whole funeral home ain't on sunnah. Or that whole masjid, I'm not praying down there. Because why? They had women at the graveyard. They had women out there. If it's a hadith, ulama say that it's permissible. It's ulama that say it's permissible ibaha. That we did all last class was the whole dalil for that, for permissible to do it. They had 5 hadith from the Prophet, authentic hadith. Some say they disagree and they say it's haram. Cool. Then you have some that say at the least, it's disliked. And if it's disliked, it hasn't reached the level of being haram. I think this is the last hadith. The last hadith that they use to say it is disliked, the hadith of Atiyah رضي الله عنها قالت نهينا عن اتباع الجنائز ولم يعزم علينا. She said that we were prohibited from following the janazah, but it wasn't like a strong prohibition. He didn't really like go hard on us when he told us don't go. You can say, is that cool? It was like don't go, but it wasn't like, like a serious don't go, like Jasm don't go, like where it's no discussion, don't go. It wasn't a no discussion, like a no rap. It was like we were told not to go, but it wasn't like that serious of a prohibition. You with me? They say, what is their proof? How do they prove? What proves in the hadith that they're allowed to go? What proves in the hadith? How can they use that hadith to say women can go? The fact that it wasn't a total prohibition. He didn't totally stop us. He said we shouldn't go, but it wasn't like it wasn't like he said it was haram for us to go. But he did say we shouldn't go. Clear? And that's what they say. They say he didn't make it like a total do not go. Women do not go to the graveyard. That's what she's saying. They say, okay, following a janazah, and this is actually following a janazah. They say, because she said we were prohibited from following the janazah. Following it. And they say following it leads to what? If you follow the janazah, it's going to lead you to the graveyard. Say he told us not to follow the janazah, but he didn't make it like that we couldn't totally follow, but he said we should, right? So if following the janazah is going to lead us to the graveyard, and that he said that, as she said, he didn't totally stop us in 100% from going. Say, then this proves that the women visiting the graveyards is at least what? Disliked. Why? Because he left room for them to do it. He told them not to do it, but he left room for them to do it. And this we got to understand. Every prohibition doesn't mean something is haram. Every prohibition doesn't mean it is reached the level of being haram. Every time Allah says don't do something, or the Prophet ﷺ says don't do something, it doesn't mean that thing specifically itself is haram. Clear? Hope that's clear, y'all. Now the question is, and this is a whole nother issue of again usul fiqh. How do you know if a prohibition equals reaches the level of being haram or less than haram? Huh? What'd you say? Now, how do you know if Allah says, for example, or the Prophet ﷺ says, I don't want to use no. That's wasalu in the Siyam. All right, don't don't fast like consecutive days, meaning fast and don't break your fast. Like you fast all day, never break it, and then fast the next day and never break it. Right? Prophet said, don't do that. All right, the fact that he said don't do that, does it mean to fast like that is haram? Huh? You understand the question? You with me? Prophet may say, la tawasalu, don't fast all day. Then at Maghrib, we supposed to break fast. Brother says, no, I feel good, I'm strong. I'm gonna keep fasting until the next day. What? Prophet said, don't do that. When he says don't do that, does that mean to do that is haram? You with me? That's a prohibition from the Prophet. Clear? Every prohibition doesn't mean that the action is haram. Clear? They say here that the fact that he gave a prohibition, he told them don't do it, but this prohibition that he gave didn't reach the level of being haram. That's what they're saying. Of course, they argue, and they say that the fact that she said he didn't really close it all the way off, he didn't go too hard on us when he said don't. They said this doesn't mean it's not haram. They disagree. This doesn't mean it's not haram. She said what? He told us not to go, but he didn't tell us like, as we say, he didn't tell us not to go. All right? He just said don't go. He didn't say don't go like don't go. He said don't go though, right? You know how we understand stuff. So the fact that there was some space there, they say that shows that it's not haram. They say no. Just because he left space, as we're gonna call it, we're just gonna call it space. Just because he left a window, doesn't mean it's not haram, y'all. That's their argument back to them. All right. He says, فَإِنَّ مَرَادَ لَمْ يُؤَكِّدَ النَّهِي. فَإِنَّ مَرَادَهَا لَمْ يُؤَكِّدَ النَّهِي. فإن مرادها لم يؤكد النهي. Say it again. فإن مرادها لم يؤكد النهي. Damn, I forgot that. Wallahi, I can't really. Nah. What's that mean? That don't make sense, though. Allah musta'an. You know, you read something sometimes, y'all, you read it, and when you read it, you get it. Then you read it again, you're like, dang, I don't get this. That's why it's good to put notes on the side. Sometimes it's to see something. Tell you, they got more Oja. They got another wedge. It says another way they also argue. They say that, if you figure it out, let me know. They also say that she said we were prohibited, right? And the fact that she says that we were prohibited, right? This is a proof and of many. A jumla? We gotta do that. I don't get it, shit. I got one of them Jones. Yeah, I can't even. Like the fact that she said, Nahena, we were prohibited. They say that is a hujjah, that is a proof that of a prohibition. She said we were prohibited to go to the graveyard, right? We were prohibited, to follow the janazah, right? They say the fact that she said that proves that they were prohibited to follow the janazah. Tell you. Her other statement, وَلَمْ يَعْزَمْ عَلَيْنَا, and he wasn't hard on us about following the janazah, or he left that window that a person can still go. They say this is ijtihad minha. This is just her understanding of it. They say this is her understanding. That what? Her understanding is that when he prohibited us, he left us some room. He didn't really make it 100%. He left some room. They say no. The fact that she said he left us some room, that's what she understood. But the wording is what? She said with her lips that he prohibited us from following the janazah. That's what he said, right? They're saying the part where she said, but he kind of like wasn't that hard about it. That's what she understood. And what you understand does not take precedence to the actual love, the actual wording. Dang. That's nice. That's a nice way. MashaAllah. MashaAllah. Oh, I'm sorry. That was a comment that somebody said online that said, even now, when they carry the janazah, the body from the graveyard at the Haram, they walk it to the graveyard, right? So they walk through like, the city. They're walking through the city to get to the graveyard. So they say sometimes it's a long walk. You know what I mean? You're carrying a body on your shoulders. Like, before the people carrying the body on the shoulder. So they said that it's possible that the women would not get into carrying the body and following the janazah in that long walk out of modesty of being out in front of the people and walking the long walk with the men and being in the mixing and all that kind of stuff out of the garden their modesty. Gee. Yeah, you don't. The Mecca, the body is carried quickly and they're passing it, and it's like, it's not chaos, but it's, it's a lot going on. It's a lot of people trying to get the barakah of carrying. So it's people carrying for a couple, then they move out the way, somebody else comes and grab, and they move out the way, and other person comes and grab all the way to the graveyard. This way everybody gets to carry the body. So they said that was her understanding. Her understanding, the wording that she said was he prohibited us. So we know that the Prophet ﷺ did what? He prohibited them. Don't go, right? Then she said, but he left a window for us to go. They say the fact that she said that was what she understood from the prohibition, right? That was her understanding. And they say, well, the proof is in the wording, the love of the Prophet. The proof is in the text, not in what somebody understood from it.
But isn't the hadith be understood by how the companions understood?
MashaAllah. Listen, you asking me? I'm just listening, man. Really? Gee, that's a good book. Yeah, but listen, a lot of times, I'm not saying you're wrong, but a lot of times they'll argue that back. He said, is the hadith, shouldn't the hadith be understood the way the Sahaba understood it? Right? If that's what one of the Sahaba understood, Sahaba had the female companions understood, shouldn't that be enough? Right? But they're going to argue and say, yeah, it's Jade. but it's not enough to go against the statement. We were prohibited. You need something stronger to go against the statement of the Prophet or something. So the way you understand it, maybe. Jade. That's one. That's only one female companion. What about the?
I wasn't saying the overall. I was just bringing that point.
Yeah.
I'm saying that her point doesn't. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Put down her understanding.
No, we're not putting it down. We're just saying that her understanding is not stronger than what he said. Sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That's what we're saying. Her understanding is not stronger than what the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said out of his mouth. You with me? It's possible a person say something, and what they say and what you understand is two totally different things. So it's possible I say something, and what I meant, you don't understand it like that. That's possible. And that's how they make their argument. Play we'll stop there. Sometimes the Raja is the Polish Sheikh Islam now. It says at the end of Tarjih. At Tarjih.
Some of the brothers in the yard, yeah, they were singing it. Some of the brothers in the city, they on the side.
Tarjih on this. At Tarjih. A lot of times people ask the question, people want to cut through the chase. Well, what's the strongest opinion? Yeah. It's khilaf shit. What's the strongest though? That's people want to know this one. Forget all the other stuff. What's the strongest opinion? The strongest opinion depends on who you ask, who you're talking to. Every time you ask somebody the strongest opinion, it could differ. The strongest opinion is what this scholar has sat and done his research, and before Allah, he's came to a conclusion that he has to stand before Allah with to say that something is permissible or not. The Rajih, that's the strongest opinion to him. The next scholar comes and sits next to him and looks at the same issue, does his research, and he comes up with another ruling. That's the strongest opinion to him. Clear? The strongest opinion is not just what Sheikh such and such said. Yeah, that's the strongest opinion to him, but that's not the strongest opinion in the world. Clear? So when you hear the strongest opinion, what's the strongest? What's the well, I'm sorry. The majority don't even mean the strongest. What the majority of the scholars say? That's not like ijma'. That doesn't mean it's the strongest necessarily, right? The strongest is to the person, to the nadhar, they say, to the scholar that's looking at the issue and doing his research or her research. For the female scholars, doing her research or his research on what the issue is, and that's what they come to. So the rajih indi, to me, the strongest opinion to me is this. And then the next scholar comes and does research on the issue, and he says the strongest opinion, the strongest to me is this, and he might come up with something different. Clear? Nah, man, that's for ulama. There's conditions itself. People here crazy. People here crazy. People in our town are crazy. They've lost some type of. They're not qualified to give verdicts. We don't have any people here qualified to give verdicts. So there are conditions in order to be able to give what they call tarjih. In order for a person to say the strongest opinion is such and such, a tarjih, the rajih, the most strong opinion, there are conditions for that you have to meet to be qualified to even say that. What you can say is, well, the strongest opinion of Sheikh bin Baz is this. To Sheikh bin Baz. The strongest opinion of Sheikh Uthaymeen, rahimahullah, is this. The strongest opinion, because people think, a lot of brothers think, Sheikh Al-Albani is the opinion, rahimahullah. So they'll say, well, Sheikh Al-Albani said this. Like, that's it. This Sheikh, you know what I'm saying? You can say what you can say is the strongest opinion to Sheikh Al-Albani, rahimahullah, is this. And I'm comfortable with that based on what he brought. Alhamdulillah. Yeah, just like that. Everybody got to call themselves Salafi. That's what Sheikh Al-Albani said. So because Sheikh Al-Albani said it, that's it. There's nothing else to talk about. And that's not how knowledge doesn't go like that. Not with the scholars, not academic with the early man. It doesn't go like that.
I was having a discussion with his brother, right? I don't think we get the topic, but he was basically telling me that Sheikh Albani wrong us this hadith. And I told him, and he said this is what Sheikh Albani understood. I told him, I don't agree. How are you going to agree with my story? Sheikh Albani spoke, who are you?
Yeah, who are you?
I'm saying is that I'm not allowed to.
Do you have something else?
No, I didn't have it.
Like, if you don't have anything else, what do you have to disagree with? No, what I'm saying is, for example, somebody brings a statement, maybe you say, wow, I never heard that. It sounds funny to me, but I don't have anything else to go on. Right? Sometimes you hear stuff and it might not sit right with you. Say that don't sound right, right? It's possible. It doesn't sound right. But at this point right now, do you have anything else Islamically to go on? No. In this case, what do you do? It's possible you had, or at the least you want to do some research. Because what if it don't sit right with you, but it doesn't sit right because you don't have any knowledge of it? It might not sit right, not because it's wrong. You just don't understand. It's possible you just don't understand how he came up with the answer. You dig what I'm saying? It's not necessarily that it's wrong. You might not understand how he got to that point, though. And a lot of times, if we don't understand how he got to that point, you say that don't make sense to me because you don't understand how you got there.
No, but within opinions that I've been researching, see how somebody got to this point.
Right.
It's like flaw. I see like,
No problem.
I don't understand the way they took to get to a conclusion. I see flaws in that. Like they would say, okay, from point A, from point A to point B is solid, but then they'll skip from point B to C. There's nothing there. And they continue.
That's difficult.
You see what I'm saying?
I get you. I
never said it. I don't not think I'm just like this.
No, it's no problem. One thing is no problem, y'all, to disagree with for example, not the hadith. And that's what we just did. All what we just did, a lot of it is scholars disagree on what does the text mean. There's no problem with that. Right? Scholars disagree on what does the text mean. It's not because Sheikh Al-Albani rahimahullah said it that it's a done deal. It doesn't work like that. It doesn't work like that for Imam Ahmed rahimahullah, or Imam Malik rahimahullah, or Sheikh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah. It doesn't work like that. Oh, Sheikh al-Islam said it. That's the end of it. It don't work like that. That's not our deen. That's not our deen. You know what I'm saying? So it's not the fact that you can't disagree with the Sheikh. Where do you get that from? That's the question. Who authorized that when this Sheikh says something, right? That is nothing else to talk about. Who authorized that? Deen in our religion. We don't have no authorization for that. That's why the Prophet ﷺ said, every mujtahid, yukhti wa yusib. The scholars, they either are correct or they're incorrect. The mujtahid, not just regular, like the mujtahid, the scholar who does all of his research and he comes up with his final ruling, sometimes he's correct, as the Prophet ﷺ said, and sometimes he's incorrect. He can be wrong. We don't have nothing saying that when this person says something, he's 100% right all of the time. And that's the problem that some brothers have fell into. They think because this sheikh said it, he's totally right. And there's no way you could possibly disagree with him. If you do disagree with him, then it's questionable if you're really following the sunnah of the Prophet, which is a flawed understanding.
It's like you were saying last week, the whole thing about calling somebody layman, and like how you belittle somebody. Like there's laymen, there's laymen on different levels.
No doubt.
So just because you as a layman didn't hear a different position on something or a different hadith, don't mean that the other person did.
Yes.
Saying shake it, but okay, well, I heard another scholar say this, I got this hadith.
People, yes.
Playing about another scholar, I heard another scholar say it. You know what I mean? So
yes.
it goes back to that. But
People are on different levels. Even though the person might not be a student of knowledge, they might not be an imam, they might not be a scholar. We say regular Muslim. Okay, regular Muslims are on different levels. Some regular Muslims have a lot more experience than other regular Muslims. Some regular Muslims are new shahadas. They have very little experience and understanding and knowledge of Islam. And some regular Muslims are 10-year, 20-year Muslims, but they didn't do any formal study or something like that, but they have a lot more experience and exposed to a lot more. And it's the same thing for the scholars and the tulab al-ilm. Students of knowledge are the same. All students of knowledge are not on the same level. All the scholars are not on the same level. Even though it says sheikh in front of their names, it says sheikh in front of the scholars' names, not the students' names. It says sheikh in front of the scholars' names. Even though it says sheikh such and such, they're not on the same level. Some of these scholars, it says sheikh in front of his name, he's been teaching for 40 years. 40 years he's been teaching. He's been giving fatwa, answering questions for 40 years, 35, 40 years. And some of them, he's been teaching for 15 years. It's not the same. It's not. So tarjih, to make a final statement, to come for a person with a final ruling, there are conditions for that I don't meet the requirements to do that. Me personally, the majority of the people that we know, like personally, are not on that level. Right? Now, what people do, I say, well, the strongest opinion to this sheikh is this. Now, if you know the issue, if you study the issue, like for example, most of the time we don't get this detailed in issues. A person might leave here tonight though and say, you know what, after hearing all of that, to me personally, I'm not saying it's the strongest issue in the world. I mean, it's the strongest opinion, but to me, after what I heard tonight, I think this is the stronger one. That's just me personally. That don't mean you got to go around and tell everybody else they can't do something that opposite of what you're doing. But based on your knowledge, what you have, based on what you have, you can say, well, in my opinion, from what I've heard, what I've studied, the strongest opinion looks like it is this. Right? It's not that you're coming up with your own thing, because remember, y'all, you only have how many opinions could it be? 3. You're stuck between those 3 anyway. Either you see it to be permissible, haram, or disliked.
I don't want to say satisfying the Jama'ah, but let's say, for example, you're in the Muslim community, and it's not a solid understanding that it's haram, it's not solid that it's permissible, but it's a mixture. Some people in the community think it is, some people think it isn't. How do you go about that if you're not on the level to
The Imam? Well, you got to teach people, number one. Number one, the issue that we're dealing with is that we're not a people, we don't live in a place where we have a madhab established for us. Right? We don't. We have no official, we don't have an official madhab. Most of the books that people read, they probably don't even know it, but most of the books follow the madhab of Imam Ahmed. Majority of the books. You might find some books here and there that follow the madhab of Shafi'i, and then it says something different, and people think that the book is shot out. Oh, this don't shot out. Look what he said about the ghusl. Right? Because it's another madhab. We don't have an official madhab. And when you have an official madhab, it makes life a lot easier for the jama'ah, because everybody understands pretty much the same thing. In our case, we have some people, for example, we got 3 opinions. So now we might have a masjid full of people, and some people believe that the first opinion is permissible. Some people believe that the second, that is not permissible. Some people believe that it's disliked. What do we do in that case? Is you have to understand that this is what's called, and it's called adab al-ikhtilaf. How do you deal with these type of differences? It's an etiquette. It's a way to deal with it. Number one, because we disagree, right, don't mean we're enemies. Number 2, is the disagreement that we're having, is this disagreement, is it a recognized disagreement amongst the scholars? Khilaf Murtaba? Yes, this is a difference of opinion that the scholar is old. So what happens? If a person goes and they go and they do the opposite, then no problem. The imam may teach that, for example, that it's permissible for the women to go to the graveyard. Does he have the dalil to do that? He has the dalil to do that. The people sitting there, maybe they disagree. Do they have dalil to disagree? They have dalil to disagree. Does anyone have to force the other group to do something? There's no pressure. Everybody got to stand before Allah on the way you practice. If that's what you believe, and that's what you believe is the truth, and you're going to stand before Allah with that, alhamdulillah. As long as you got dalil for what you're doing. But it's not my job or the imam's job to force you to believe what I'm saying. Now, a lot of times people will teach books based on what they study. A madhab is not like the final say, y'all. Imam Ahmed said it got to be this, or Imam Shafi, no. And that's another talk that we need to do about what is a madhab? What does it really mean when a person say they follow a madhab? That's a whole discussion in itself. What does it mean for a person to follow a madhab? And that's an issue that is highly misunderstood. That I know I didn't understand it before I left. I thought it was something totally was not. And a lot of people may understand something.
So, I just want to ask about hadith. The Prophet says about the mujtahid. What defines a mujtahid? Then,
yes.
Then the question is, for example, being that he gave us these three opinions, do we still have to go to a mujtahid to give us or we do our own ijtihad based upon those?
Well, that is the farther you're going to go is like, for example, the scholar said A, B, and C, you're going to choose from one of them. That's it. With the person who's not a scholar, the obligation is to do what? Follow. Taqleed in this case. They translate this taqleed a lot of time as blind following. Right? And we all know blind following is what? Huh? Haram. All the time? There's sometimes, that's why Allah said, ask the people of knowledge if you don't know. Sometimes you go to a sheikh and ask him a question, he give you an answer. He don't give you no dalil. You say, yo, I asked the sheikh, he said, yeah. Sheikh said, yeah, yup. And you know why? I don't know. His sheikh was busy. Right? Then we make an excuse. We don't have dalil. Right? But the sheikh said, yes, you can do that. Sheikh said it was sunnah. And he gives you no dalil. Right? Why wouldn't he give you dalil?
Somebody took it out, had to happen. Somebody took it out and they got to make them do.
The level, right. Depends on the level of the person. Everybody wants dalil, but the reality is this. There are times when if you told a person a dalil, they wouldn't even understand it if you told them. So it depends on the level of the person asking the question. Maybe the questioner is not on the level to even understand the proof. It's possible. And the one being asked is going to make that gauge.
You say that's not for a student. It's confusing. What's the difference between a doctor and a qualification? If I find an issue and I go do my research on it, and then can I do research, find multiple different opinions, and say, well, based off of the little he brought more ayat in the Quran than he brought a hadith that's not from Bukhari and Muslim. I feel as though this is the strongest because of his little. This is not a qualification. What's the difference between that?
A bath is a research. You may come bath literally a research. A tarjih is to come out at the end and say the strongest opinion. You made a conclusion, right? Now what you're saying, everybody does. What you're saying, everybody does. People read through things and they say, well, I think this one looks better than me. I'm gonna do that. Right? Cool. In that case, majority of the time, people haven't done any real research. You with me? What did they do? They've seen two things from two different sheikhs. Possibly it's a page or so. Right? Generally, this is my sheikh on this one. Everything he write, I like the way he, you know what I'm saying, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with it. This one's stronger than me. And they go with that, which is fine. If a person wants to step further, and they did research, and they did a whole research on the issue, and they came up with a conclusion at the end they're going to practice Islam based on that, then they've made tarjih on a small level. That's fine. For yourself. For yourself, yeah. For yourself. You make tarjih for yourself. That's fine. We're talking about, I get up here and I tell you the strongest opinion in this issue is this. Kada.
If you're a teacher and you're teaching a Jama'ah, eventually somebody's going to ask you about, why are you teaching, this opinion instead of this one? you can't tell them, well, this is what I've come up to based off of my studies.
Yeah, because his studies is based upon studies on scholars. So he's just basically relaying.
What you're saying is,
Your studies based off of the topic. That's
listen, what you're saying is, for example, we teach Hanbali fiqh. Why am I teaching Hanbali fiqh and not Shafi'i fiqh or Maliki fiqh or fiqh of Imam Abu Hanifa? Huh? Only reason, well, why did I even study Hanbali fiqh? Because I was in Saudi Arabia, and that's the method that they teach there. It's the only reason, right? So now that I teach Hanbali fiqh, it's possible it's stuff that I teach, and I don't think it's the strongest opinion. There's a maqam, there's a space for it, there's a time for learning, and there's a time for fatwa. They're two separate things. When you go through books of ulama, it's not about do you agree with everything, is everything he said the strongest. That's not the issue. The number one issue originally is understanding the text and the issue. And so to sawwar al-mas'ala, understand the masail first, period. What are we even talking about? What is wudu? What is a condition? Shurut al-wudu, what is a condition? Right? Maybe he says this condition is not necessarily do I agree or not. Right? You with me? It's not about if it's strong or not. All I'm trying to do is understand the method, the text, what the author wrote. What's stronger or not? How would I know what's stronger or not unless I got to a certain level to be able to distinguish? Right? What's the level of distinguishment? You had to at least do some serious research. Right? So now I come in the masjid and I teach a book of the Hanbali madhab, and somebody says to me, and I say, for example, here, for the issue of the women visiting the graves, the scholars differ. The book says it's haram, but just to let you all know, the scholars do differ on the issue. If somebody says, well, what's the strongest opinion? Right? Sahih? They say, what's the strongest opinion? My question is, to who? The strongest opinion to who? To you. To me, from what I've read, I think the first opinion is the strongest. That's just me. Does that mean you have to agree with it? You don't have to agree with it. Or I could just teach the book. I could teach the book, and the book says the strongest opinion is that it's haram. I go through and I teach the book, and I say it's haram for the sisters to visit the grave because this, that, and the third. Scholars do differ, though, y'all. They say, what's the strongest opinion to you? Well, I agree with the author based on the hadith that they brought and understand. Because the teacher teaches something, y'all, when it comes to issues of khilaf, number one, again, this is not how you learn fiqh, number one. This is just like something we're doing. You don't learn like this because it's confusing. You don't learn fiqh through comparing differences of opinion. That's not how ulama teach fiqh, okay? The way ulama teach fiqh is the way that we teach, or anywhere you go, they're going to teach a beginner book in a specific madhab. You learn that and learn it good. Once you learn that, you're ready to look at something else. You can't come in looking at 3-4 different opinions with all these dalils and wedges still out. That's not how you learn. You're just going to be all over the place. And that's not how the scholars teach, right? So I could teach a book, and it's possible that the author says something is haram. The scholars differ. Me personally, I disagree, but I'm not here to give you my personal opinion. We're going through the book, right? We're learning the book and what the author has come to. The author is the scholar, not me. You understand what I'm saying? In this case, I'm talking about myself. I'm not the scholar. And that's not how we learn. We learn, you make sure you understand the meta. What did the author write? Understand that. Could the teacher possibly disagree with what the author of the book says? It's possible. Do the people that the imam is teaching, do they have to agree with every issue that the imam agrees with? They don't have to agree. Not necessarily. You with me? Oh, depending on where you go? Allah understand. So it's a lot of layers to peel back, but at the end, the people, the teacher has to understand that, number one, it depends on how you were taught. When it comes to fiqh, you don't learn fiqh like this. Like we wouldn't go through a bunch of issues like this. This is just something that it came at the end of the book of funeral prayers, and this is an issue that we deal with. And a lot of times, this kind of stuff causes problems when we get to graveyards at janazas, and people get out of line and they make it into a whole big problem, and it's really, really not that deep. It's really not that deep, and that's a whole issue of how to deal with differing when it comes to issues where scholars differ. How do we deal with that? That's a adab al-ikhtilaf that maybe we should try to do something on that if Allah makes easy. But if not, we'll stop there. Inshallah ta'ala. Wa sallallahu wa sallam wa baraka ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. All right.